Okay, today we're going to take a look at how to do a comparison exercise by looking at an example. First, let's begin by reading the source that has been assigned to you. In what way is source A different from source B? In source A, here the provenance, we see that it's a historian's view about the defeat of the British in World War II. In the source, it reads, the Japanese had defeated the British in only 10 weeks. The main reason for the British defeat was that Britain was also tied up with the war in Europe and North Africa. She was fighting against Germany and Italy and could not afford to spread her resources to the Far East. Thinking that tanks were not suitable for jungle warfare, the British leaders in London did not supply them to Malaya, while the Japanese came armed with 150 light tanks. The British also did not have enough anti-tank guns to counter the Japanese tank attack. Let's move on to source B. From the provenance, we can tell that it's a war survivor's view about the defeat of the British. In it, it says, I would say the British were too confident. They took things too easily. They spent too much time on relaxation, dancing, enjoying themselves instead of concentrating on the war. That's how they lost the battle. So we, being civilians and under the British control at that time, what can we do? Just take their word. They were more or less the overlords or masters. So, as I was reading the sources, you notice that I have highlighted parts which I thought were important for my answer. Now, let's take a look at how you do a comparison question by looking at this table. I start off first by looking for similarities, and after reading I found that the first similarity was that it was both sources were talking about the defeat of British in World War II. The second similarity I found was that the British were unprepared, and that was the reason for the defeat. Okay, this common similarity can be found in both source A and in source B. Moving on to difference, the common difference which I found was that there were different reasons for the defeat. Let's take a look. In source A, we see that the British were defeated because they were fighting a war in Europe during the same time. However, in source B, it gives a separate reason by saying that the British were defeated because they were overly confident that they would win Japan in the war. So now that I have done my working, I'm now able to write out my answer, but they have to be written in a certain way. So let's take a look at how it's supposed to be written. Remember, your answers have to be in paragraphs. Step 1 will be a similarity based on the source type or provenance. So my simple one sentence would be, both sources A and B are about the defeat of the British. For my second paragraph, after leaving a line, will be my comparison of the common similarities. Sources A and B are similar in talking about the unpreparedness of British during World War II in Singapore. That is a common criteria. Source A says, do not forget to give the evidence because that's very important. Source A says the British also did not have enough anti-tank guns to counter the Japanese tank attack. And source B says they spent too much time on relaxation, dancing, enjoying themselves instead of concentrating on the war. For the third paragraph, remember you always have to give both similarities and differences. I would write down that source A is different from source B, as source A tells me that the British were defeated because they were fighting a war in Europe during the same time. How do I know that? Don't forget to give the evidence. The main reason for the British defeat was that Britain was also tied up with the war in Europe and North Africa. However, source B tells me that the British were defeated because they were overly confident that they would win Japan in the war. Source B says they took things easily, they spent too much time on relaxation, dancing, enjoying themselves, and instead of concentrating on the war. So let's recap to check whether we have included the things that we were supposed to include. After completing your answer, please check that you have included the common criteria for your similarity. You have included your common criteria for your difference, as well as having provided evidence to support your answers.